Okay, welcome to part 2 of the Tamiya Leopard II A6 build. What we're going to work on is the wheels today. I'm going to skip the rear hull for now. So first up, we're going to work on the drive wheels, and in the previous illustration you can see that there is a poly cap that needs to go in here. I don't have any video of it showing that, but basically it's like a vinyl tube that you put inside here of the hollow of the drive wheel, and then you can glue it together, and then when you go to put it on the road wheel mount, it will be able to be removed later for painting. So next up, we're going to work on the actual main road wheels, and you're going to need to make 14 of those. So basically we're just cutting them off the sprue, cleaning them up. So these are the poly caps I was talking about earlier. So you just have to use those inside of the road wheels, and that way you can put them onto the swing arms easily, and you can remove them later for painting and whatnot. So one thing I like to do with my road wheels, for a Leopard even, is to give the wheels a bit of wear, because that's what happens in real life. Sometimes these things, over rough terrain or on concrete, or just due to how long they've been on the vehicle, you get some wear and tear on the rubber tires of the wheels. So basically what I'm using here is a really rough sandpaper, like 60 grit or something, to give it an initial roughness. I'm just kind of randomly going here and there, just breaking up the smooth surface of a brand new tire look. And then, I'm coming back in with a scalpel blade to give more like a chipping kind of a look. And then to get rid of the fuzziness, I'm using some of the Tamiya liquid cement to melt the plastic back into sort of a rubber tire look. So with these road wheels, some of them maybe are not as worn or degraded as some of the other ones. So you can see here that I'm just taking a little bit of chipping here and there out of these tires, and I'll come back with a not so brutal sandpaper just to break up the surface a bit, but I'm not really looking to get gouges like maybe I did in the earlier part of this video here. So once the Tamiya liquid cement dries, I like to come back in with just a beauty shop kind of a, sanding block. It's got like 4 different layers. And the reason I'm using that is because it's soft. So if I were to use like a straight edge kind of a sanding implement, what would happen is I'd get flat spots in the wheels. So that's why I use a sponge sort of like fingernail, beauty sanding block, because it's got some give to it. So when it goes around the wheels, it's not going to make any flat spots. I didn't add too much wear and tear to the idler wheels because they're not really in contact with the ground. So I left them just with a light sanding. So now I'm going to add the rear hull bulkhead, and I forgot to put on a few of the tow hooks on this, so just refer to the instructions and make sure you put yours on. But I'll come back and add mine later, not a big deal. So after a test fit and cleaning up, I'm going to glue it to the rest of the hull using Tamiya liquid cement. So next up is we're going to work on the swing arms for mounting the road wheels. Before actually adding the swing arms, to make it easier to get these shock absorbers in, we'll put them in first and then come back later with the swing arm parts after those have all been cut from the trees and cleaned up from the attachment points. Tamiya has included a couple of jigs that are meant to make sure all the swing arms are level, and you're not going to have any issues with one road wheel not being on the ground when you go to display this model once you're finished. So the next part is putting on these idler wheel mounts, and unfortunately I kind of goofed up in that I put them upside down, but I was able to later on take them off and rearrange them to the proper side and the proper orientation, because the way I put them in, it would not allow the hull to come down on top of the lower tub. So just be aware of that when you go to glue in your idler arm mounts with that shock that's on there as well. So what I'm doing here is I'm just doing a test fit. I want to see how these are going to attach to the hull. I'll take them off, as you can see in the background. Now I'm going to attach the drive wheel mount. This is the final drive, I guess is what you would call this, and it's pretty straightforward. Just cut it off the tree, clean it up, glue it on, and then you'll be able to put your sprocket wheel on there as well. Next up is we're going to be adding the mounts for the return rollers. As you can see, there's very strong keying elements to the parts, so it would be pretty hard to get these mounted on wrong. So once those are on, I'll add the return rollers themselves, and again, pretty hard to get those wrong because Tamiya has provided very strong mounting key points so that you can only mount it one way. Again, just another quick test fit. So after taking off all those road wheels again, I'm going to add the return rollers. So I'll clean up those return rollers with the nail buffer block that I bought on Amazon. You can get about 10 of them in one order very cheaply. So before gluing the top of the upper hull onto the lower hull, what we have to do is add a piece of this clear plastic that will represent a periscope. It's kind of a cheesy, cheap little thing that Tamiya is offered here, but you know, it's what we got to work with. So basically, I'm cutting it out very carefully. I'm cleaning up the attachment points, and then very carefully, after positioning, I'm using the minimal amount of glue to hold it in place. I'm just using Tamiya liquid cement, and it's easy to screw this up by using too much cement. And you'll see that I actually kind of dab off the applicator a little bit before I go to glue it in. So just be very careful when using this. If you screw up, you can always cut out a piece from what's on that sheet, and you can get it right that way, hopefully.
Come on.
Next up is we're going to add these cooling unit cover plates. After those are in place, I'm going to add these tow hooks. Here I'm just cutting out a few of the parts that are for the driver's hatch. I'm only going to put one side of the parts that hold the hatch in place because I want to add the periscopes after I've painted the hatch. So yeah, you can put the periscopes in now and then glue in the front and the back parts that hold in the hatch. But then what's going to happen is you're going to have issues around paint getting on the periscopes, which means then you're going to have to mask off that periscope, and that's going to be a problem with these pieces of acetate that Tamiya have given us. And then now here what I'm working on is the headlight holders and the headlights. So just be careful how they all go together, refer to the instructions so that you don't get it wrong. So these two other parts here make up the rest of the driver's hatch assembly, and like I said, I'm going to keep them unglued at this point because I want access to the underside of the driver's hatch to attach the periscopes after I paint it. And then I'll glue this back piece in and hold the driver's hatch in place. Point in the build where we're going to work on these rubber band tracks, and for the most part these look okay. The only problem I have with rubber band tracks is when you wrap them around the sprocket wheel, often you get this indentation in the middle part because of the tension that's involved. Using a very minimal amount of glue, I tacked these tracks together to get some photographs and to check the fit. I will be taking them apart again later to prime them and paint them. This book here is a very good reference for the Leopard II tank. There's actually a couple of them. This one is for the Deutschland Bundeswehr version, and there's also one that I have that is for international Leopard II tanks. And it's a pretty good reference. It covers a lot of stuff, and it's not very cheap. The reason I'm looking at it right now is because on the hull with the Tamiya, they often just make solid grab handles. So I'm just showing you here in a photograph that what we have to do is cut these solid pieces off that Tamiya has molded on that are supposed to represent grab handles, and we're going to replace those with some wire that we actually drill little holes into the plastic, bend some wire, glue them in with some crazy glue, and then what we can do is have a better looking, more authentic looking tank model. I like to use a knife that's got a curved blade to it to clean up some of the debris left behind. This tool has a very, very sharp tip that I'm using to create a pilot hole for when I go to drill it in some holes for the wire. So next I have to pick out a nice drill bit from my collection, and you can see here this is a hand manipulated pin vise I'm going to use just as a demonstration. Because I have it and I want to get through this quickly, I'm changing from the hand pin vise to my Fordham drill, and I'm going to make quick work of all these holes. To bend the grab handle wire, you can use a tool like this, or like later on I'll show you can just use a pair of needle nose pliers. The wire that I'm using is just some scrap. I believe this is like telephone wire. I don't know, but it might be a little thick after I look at the pictures later on. I'm wondering if maybe I should have picked a little bit thinner of a wire, but for this purposes, it'll suit well enough. Yeah, the wire can be bent just as easily with a pair of needle nose pliers. These ones have a bit of a grip. Later on you'll see I'm using one that have a flat surface, which I think are better. And then you can just check if you've got the right size. You could make a jig where each one is, I've done that in the past where I make a jig to be able to bend these all the same size, but it's just as quick to just bend them up and fit them individually. You can see here, these are the pliers that I have that have no grip in it, so it actually gives you a little bit more control. And then I'm just dipping the ends of the wire in some black cyanacrylic glue, which I will come back later and clean up with some debonder. And now you can see I'm cleaning up where the hull was glued to the lower tub, and there's some melted plastic that's squished out, which I wanted actually because it helps make the bond very nice without any gaps. So what I'm going to do next is clean up all the excess cyanacrylic glue, and using a brush I'll just try and remove the excess. I'm going to have to shop around for a different debonder because this one is a bit stronger than I would like. It actually kind of interacts with the plastic too much and leaves a bit of a marring surface. Alright, that'll do it for this episode. If you're not already a subscriber, become one so you don't miss anything going forward. If you'd like to help support the channel, become a patron. There is a link in the lower right corner of the channel's banner. In the meantime, and in between time, that's another edition of Jet Scale Models. Check out these shots with the primer already on it now.